Hidden gnowledge. Docetism was one example of a form of thinking that came to be known as Gnosticism, or Gnosticism. Ugh. The term was coined by a 17th century academic, but he based it on a much earlier phrase used by Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyon, who talked about a whole range of alternative Christianities as being gnosticae haeresis, a choice to claim knowledge. From this phrase we get two powerful and potent terms. Doesn't powerful mean potent? Anyway. Gnostics and heresy. As more people explored Christianity, they asked some searching questions. How can a world with so much suffering be created by a good God? How could the all-powerful God also be a crucified Jewish peasant? And how can I make money out of this thing? Sometimes these questions led to different versions of Christianity. Irenaeus listed 217 of these variant Christian splinter groups. Although they get lumped together under the title Gnostic, they were very different in outlook. For a long time, all that scholars had to hand in examining the Gnostics were the writings of their opponents. Then, in 1945, in the Egyptian desert, a man went digging for sabak, a kind of fertilizer, and he found a red earthenware jar containing 13 leather-bound papyrus books containing 52 Gnostic texts. The books became known as the Nag Hammadi Library, after the place in which they were found. These books show that Gnosticism had many different expressions. However, among the different groups, there are some frequently recurring ideas. One, the world is really bad. Many Gnostic sects believe the material world to be evil, and if that were the case, it could not have been created by a perfect God. So the creator God of the Old Testament must be a lower division God, a demiurge, an idea they nicked from Plato, and the word means craftsman. Two, the human body is really, really bad. The Gnostics show a distaste for the human body. In the Docetists' case, this led to the idea that Jesus wasn't a real man. Others suggested that Jesus merely moved into a body for a bit. His spirit joined the human Jesus, but left just before the crucifixion, thus avoiding all that messy blood and inconvenient pain stuff. This is called Corinthianism, after Corinthus, its most prominent spokesman. Gnostic writings in this form sometimes have the spirit Jesus sitting on a tree nearby, laughing while the human Jesus goes through agonies. This seems rather unchristian behaviour on the part of Christ. One particularly famous Gnostic was a teacher called Valentinus, who taught at Rome sometime before the middle of the 2nd century. He solved what we might call the toilet problem by claiming that while Jesus ate and drank, nothing ever came out. He ate and drank in a peculiar way and did not evacuate his food. Where was I? Because flesh was sinful, Gnostics treated it harshly and were often ascetics. But this contempt did not extend so far as to actually losing the flesh. There are no accounts of Gnostic martyrs. Indeed, they were rather sniffy about Christians who embraced martyrdom. They might have considered the flesh disgusting, but they clearly had their limits. Others took this disdain for the flesh in the opposite direction. The father and son team of Carpocrates, circa 145, and Epiphanes, argued that God's law actually commanded promiscuity. They believed that in order to progress from this world, you had to experience absolutely everything. So they indulged in every sin, up to and including Morris dancing. They were also proto-communists, claiming that all class differences were wrong and that all property and women should be held in common. Clement of Alexandria claimed that at their services they have intercourse where they will and with whom they will. A whole new light on sharing the peace. And thirdly, the universe is really bad and really good. Many Gnostic sects believed in a kind of dualism, an endless cosmic battle between dark and light, good and evil, the dark and light side of the force, etc. This might be because they had some contact with Persian Zoroastrianism, or it might be because they could see things only in black and white. For anything Jewish is really, really, really bad. Gnostics, mainly being Greek, found it deeply embarrassing that the early church relied so much upon the Hebrew scriptures, with their ridiculous accounts of creation. 5. Women are really unspeakably bad. You sometimes hear claims that Gnostic teaching represents a milder, kinder, more hyperallergenic Christianity, which is heavily feminist and that would appeal to the 3rd century equivalent of Guardian readers. In fact, Gnostic texts abound in misogyny. Women were rubbish, basically. And 6, the enlightened, on the other hand, are tremendously good. Much of their teaching was reserved for enlightened, superior believers known as spirituals. True wisdom was not for the plebs. The doors of perception opened only to those with an invite. So just to recap those 6 key themes of the Gnostics. The world is really bad. The human body is really, really bad. The universe is really bad and really good. Anything Jewish is really, really, really bad. Women are really unspeakably bad. And the enlightened, on the other hand, are tremendously good. Got that? Good. All Gnostic groups had a problem, though. And that was that pretty much everything in the Gospels was exactly the opposite of their enlightened, hidden ideas. Evidently, the truth was so deep that it had been hidden from those who actually knew and saw Jesus. The Gnostic sects solved this problem with a masterstroke of lateral thinking. They invented their own Gospels. But here they came up against the same issue facing Ignatius and Clement. How do you give authority to your ideas? The Gnostics did it by attributing their Gospels to various characters in the New Testament narratives. There were Gospels attributed to Philip, to Thomas, and Mary. There were apocryphal visions attributed to John, Paul, Adam, and 3 to James. Claims that these Gospels tell us stuff about Jesus are almost always a load of sabach. For one thing, they were written between 150 and 200 years after Christ. To take perhaps the most famous, the Gospel of Thomas dates from AD 150 to 200 at the earliest. The first known reference to it comes from between 225 and 235. Some may contain nuggets of truth or genuine memories, or even, as is the case with Thomas, some genuine sayings of Jesus among the welter of invention. But they are not eyewitness documents. Anyone who tries to tell you that the Gospel of Judas was really by Judas, or the Gospel of Philip was written by Philip, or that Paul had anything to do with the apocalypse of Paul, is trying to sell you something. A documentary normally, or a terribly written novel.